You should always have 4 cavalry units in any of your armies from the start until the late game if you're playing as a standard nation and not as a horde or as the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which has the ability to go cavalry focused because of their extra combat ability. The reason for this is quite simply because the shock damage delivered by the cavalry is significant. Even in the late game, the cavalry units have a lot more shock damage than the standard infantry units do have, as well as they deliver a lot of flanking damage, which in most battles does get delivered, since late game the combat width increases and most armies are not going to be an 80 stack or 120k stack in every single battle. That being said, it is true, however, that cavalry units are not as cost efficient as infantry units, and for the cost of 1 cavalry unit in the late game you can have 4 infantry units. But when you weigh in the fact that those 4 infantry units will eventually get you over the force limit, then the cavalry unit is about the same price, with the addition that it does a lot more shock damage. So my honest recommendation is make sure that you have 4 cavalry units in all of your army compositions from the start until the late game. From the very start of the game, it is highly recommended that you have the standard 12 infantry units with 4 cavalry units until you reach tech level 7, when you get the cannons, in which case you should add 4 cannons to your army. Do not add more than 4 cannons because the starting cannons are absolutely trash and will not do too much damage to the enemy. Beginning with the 16th century, your standard army composition should be 12 infantry, 4 cavalry, and 10 cannons. Have this template until around 1550, when you should switch over to 16 standard infantry, 4 cavalry, and 10 artillery. With the beginning of the 17th century, that means between 1600s up until the 1650s, increase the amount of cannons that you have in your armies. So make sure that you have 16 infantry, 4 cavalry, and 15 cannons. Between 1650 and 1700, increase the amount of infantry to 20 infantry, keep 4 cavalry, and increase the cannons to 16 cannons. At the beginning of the 18th century, make sure you have 22 infantry, 4 cavalry, and 19 cannons in your armies. Altogether, this means that you will have 45 units in each of your armies, and that is very crucial that you keep 19 cannons and not more than that, since the standard tactic for attacking is to have 2 at least armies together. So when you do attack, make sure you bring in 2 armies from 2 separate provinces and merge them together. Your combat width is going to be 38, so 19 plus 19 is going to be 38, and the entire back row of your army is going to be full of artillery, with the added effect of you not losing so much manpower to attrition whilst not at war and whilst moving your units through various provinces. Between 1750 and the 1800s, upgrade your units to a 26 infantry, 4 cavalry, and 20 artillery standard army composition. And the very last army composition you should have, which would probably be between 1780 and 1821, the standard layout should be 30 infantry, 4 cavalry, and 26 artillery units. When it comes to your army composition, I really recommend you take a closer look at these very important values, namely combat width, military tactics, flanking range, as well as at the various infantry, cavalry, and artillery modifiers such as combat ability, fire, and shock pips, as these are extremely important, and your army composition should be according to these values. The maximum combat width that you can have in the game is 40, which means that on each of the front and the back row you can have a maximum of 40 units at any given time after you've reached technology level 26. That means that even though you have 60 artillery units in your army template, only 40 of those are going to be firing from the back row, and only 40 infantry and cavalry mixed will be charging in from the front row. Keep in mind that whenever you are attacking an enemy, you should always keep your armies close together so that you can drip in 1 unit at a time, thus conserving your army morale and ensuring that you will be winning that battle.